Okay, there we go. So I think you can read it for yourself. I'm having trouble going back and forth. So we are long overdue to reevaluate the effectiveness or lack thereof of our race and gender neutral processes in contracting in every arena, not just in construction. You may recall, and I could actually give you more detail, but I won't, just because we seem to be having a long meeting. But you will recall that we had the disparity study that was commenced, I think in 2015, reported to the board, and the validation was done by Attorney Franklin Lee. And in 2017, part of his recommendation was that we suspend the race and gender conscious program for 1 year while we get our data act together, right? And so it's been longer than that. It's my request then that the board discuss asking the superintendent to schedule a workshop to give us an update where we are with regards to MWBE and especially with the data collection piece. And then like actually per our own policy, it is time for us to initiate an update of the last disparity study. And while I'm talking, let me just thank President Gordon of the Palm Beach County Caucus of Black Elected Officials, because this was a fairly vigorous topic at the last meeting. And so I'm bringing it forward for my colleagues to discuss.
Discussion, Mrs. Whitfield.
I think this is a great idea. I was actually curious. I've been having some community discussions as well about policies, and this seems like one very specific policy, but I was wondering if we're doing anything kind of more globally to look at our policies to make sure that we're covering every base we can. I just, I think there seems to be a lot of movement in this area, and we should capitalize on it while we can.
You want to respond to that?
I'm not quite sure. Are you talking about a comprehensive review of all policies to see if we're complying with
everything? We have 9,000 bazillion policies. But I was just thinking, it's like when we're talking about what can we do in light of George Floyd and all of the things that we do, we haven't really brought up our own police department, and we're talking about it with every other police department in the country, making sure that we've covered and that we have the appropriate policies in place. And I don't know what those would be, but also looking at our alternative education. I think that's been something where we could do better around, suspensions and expulsions. So I know we've looked at this in the past, and we've done a lot of things and we made a lot of progress, but I'm just interested if anyone in the community has ideas of places that we could do better. So I don't really have an answer. When I'm looking at this and about contracts, I want to know if there's anything else we can do.
Dr. Robinson and Mrs. Andrews.
So I think this request is to discuss the disparity study, which is about business practices. I think that the points that Mrs. Whitfield brings up are going to be discussed actually in the next discussion item being brought by Mrs. Andrews. And so this is my request for the board to direct staff to bring us an update on the MWBE policy and the data that we need to collect and and updating the disparity study, to have a workshop on to encompass those topics as a minimum.
You want to make a motion, Dr. Robinson?
We make motions and discussion items now?
Yes.
Did I lose that? Okay, so oh yeah, I forgot. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, so the motion is that the superintendent schedule a board workshop to include the status of our diversity in business practices, the associated data collection, and the metrics around an updated disparity study.
That was seconded by by Mrs. Andrews and Mrs. Whitfield. Take your pick, Mrs. Bass. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Mr. Superintendent, you're still here with us?
I haven't left you, sir. I have one question for Dr. Robinson on, and I know it's already passed, but that last part. Dr. Robinson, if I'm not mistaken, shouldn't the request be to actually to put on the street the RFP to do the I'm just Julian, I just don't understand, like the update to the disparity, like the old disparities there, or are we asking for a new one? I guess I just need clarity, that's all.
Okay, so the motion, I think, is appropriate to come back for the workshop so that as a result of the workshop, you can determine what steps are necessary. And then a board item would go on to agree to the disparity study, et cetera.
All right, so it's a workshop to then discuss the next steps. Am I getting that correct? All right, so yes, absolutely, we'll do that. We'll work with that Office of Diversity and Business Practices, and we'll figure out how we can get this together, and we'll schedule that workshop. Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Robinson.
So just to follow up on that, please make sure, Dr. Fenoy, that Mike Burke and his shop, specifically Mr. Carr, are part of that, because they've been doing an awful lot of work trying to figure out how to accurately collect our data.
Okay.
Right? And that is like, that's the major thing that we need to do to move forward.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Mrs. Andrews, board discussion item 2. Microphone.
Okay, can you read it for me? I'm not looking at it right now. I'm on the screen.
Sure. It says request for workshop. You click on the right one. I'm on the right one. It's long. Dr. Fenoy, can you cut your microphone a minute? We're getting feedback. Thank you. As a member of the school board, Mrs. Andrews, I'm getting feedback from yours too. Thank you. As a member of the school board and the school board's representative to the Palm Beach County Criminal Justice Commission and Circuit 15 Juvenile Justice Advisory Board, please have appropriate staff provide the following data related to our students from July 25th to present. Please provide information in accordance with the district's budget years. Number 1, data on student arrest, student felony suspensions, student expulsions, youth teen court, juvenile first offenders program. Sub A, how many students were arrested by the school district's police department? Sub A1, how many students received a felony suspension as a result of an arrest? Number 2, how many students were expelled due to an arrest by school police? Number 3, after providing a total figure for each year and category, please break out the data as to the number of students by race arrested in the school/location of the arrest. Paragraph 1B, how many of the arrested students qualified for youth court? Paragraph 1, of the above number, please break out the data as to the race of students qualifying for youth court. Number 2, how many of the above students participated in the various levels of youth court, i.e. juvenile first offenders program, youth defender program 1.2, 1, 2, and 3. Please further provide the data by race for each program. Paragraph C, how many students were sent to teen court, drug court by year, by race for each year. Paragraph D, annual use of force report for the department, school police each year. Type of use of force, please break out data by race. Paragraph D1, how often has pepper spray been used by the department, school police each year. Race of students per pepper spray. Number 2, please provide a copy of your use of force policy or general order. Once this information is prepared and submitted to board members, I would like for a board workshop to be scheduled for discussion on these matters. Number 2, policy review. Number 2, policy revision and or development on subjects of racial equity in school police department. Number 3, further discussion on school district proclamation regarding the killing of George Floyd. So I guess the first one is to discuss a workshop after all of that information is brought back to the board members. That is, I guess, the motion you would like to have considered this evening, Mr. Danvers?
Yes, I would love it to be considered. I sit as your representative on the Criminal Justice Commission as well as the Juvenile Justice 15th Circuit Board. And now, you know, we have not talked about any of these pieces that I've written down here. We have a lot of discussions with the courts as it relates to some of these. When we talk about school police, we're talking about policing right now. We've hired so many more police in Palm Beach County School District as it relates to the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas incident and the death there. And I know that they receive training when we bring them through and have their interviews with us. But we really have not looked at our policies, if we have any. I've been checking around and I don't think we have any as it relates to our police department. So this is a big chunk of things that we need to do when we start talking about racial equity and police force, use of force. I think we do have data on whether our police officers have used force on our children. I've not seen any of that since I've been sitting here on the board. So it's a whole lot here. I'd love to see if we have a copy of our use of force policy. Maybe we do have that, or do we have data on that? It's all about the data right now to see how we're doing. I think Palm Beach County feels that we're doing well, but we don't know until we see the information. So a workshop, a true workshop with the chief of police, Safe Schools, and all the other entities to talk about how well we've been doing over the last few years, especially as it relates to the killing of George Floyd, but as it relates to our children every single day. And if we don't keep up with this data and have policies as it relates to making sure our children are kept safe and that we are making sure that we have oversight on it, then we're lost. So we need to do this. I didn't get the answers to these questions today. I sent them in last week, and I think they need to be answered for all of us, but I think we need to have a discussion, a workshop as soon as possible.
Okay, so if I can restate the motion in simple terms, after all of those questions are answered and the answers are submitted to the board members, Mrs. Andrews' motion is to then schedule a workshop to discuss all of that information at that time. That's the motion by Mrs. Andrews. Okay, Mrs. Andrews, with that motion that way? Yes? Okay.
That's correct.
Dr. Robinson, you're seconding that discussion? Mrs. Whitfield?
I just wanted to say that I know sometimes these workshops take 6 months or more, but this one I think needs to happen sooner than later. I really think that if we don't move quickly on that, the community will ask us why we took so long. So I think this should be done as soon as humanly possible.
If there's no further discussion, we'll vote. Go ahead, Dr. Robinson.
Yes, thank you. So I'm so glad Mrs. Andrews asked all these questions. I think staff knows, so let me just make it clear when you start talking about data. I need the data all disaggregated by race, gender, free and reduced lunch, and ELL status, as well as ESE status, where possible. I don't think the school police arrest we should be able to capture that. But I also want to know the same information about arrest by other agencies on our campuses, right? I would like to add to that to make sure that we're including the specific training for school police, right? For example, I hope that they have been through the fair and impartial policing training, right? I would like to know if they have been through the lifetime of consequences training. And then I'm sure that there's others, but those are the two that come to the top of my head. So I've also been involved with the Palm Beach County Caucus of Black Elected Officials, talking about these issues related to reforming the criminal so-called justice system. So out of that, I don't want to pull all the questions and recommendations. I would encourage board members to look at Campaign Zero. But I want to also know about how do we track complaints against our school police officers, right? And I'm sure if you look at Campaign Zero, you will see some questions that will be coming forward. So be proactive and answer them at the workshop ahead of time, please. Thank you.
So just so the administration understands the questions that have been added so that they're part of the workshop. Dr. Fenoy, you think you've got enough there? I guess the board clerk can play all that back from Dr. Robinson.
No, we will. The team has already started working on some of this. So there are many, unfortunately in our world, there are many departments. This isn't in one place. So we will they're compiling that now as soon as we get it together. I would probably argue that when we do a workshop, we probably can't put a lot of other things on it. It's probably going to be a pretty long one considering all the questions. So we'll work through that.
Mrs. Andrews?
Mr. Barbieri, and I asked our general counsel, because I really truly did look to see if we had any policies as it relates to school police. And she couldn't really give me any information on that. So maybe she can respond to that too.
Right. And for clarification, we deferred that request to school police. They have their own set of what's called, I believe, general orders and special orders that are unique to law enforcement. And so I deferred that to them because I don't. I would prefer that they answer those questions.
Okay, is there any other discussion on the motion that's on the floor? All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Now, Mrs. Andrews, the second one, I guess, is the one you're talking about now. You want a policy revision and or development on subjects of racial equity in the school police department.
Yes, that's really a big one. I spent quite a bit of time, we've really been into this thing after the death of George Floyd. So I began to look at us as a school district to see what were we doing as it related to equity. And I know that we have policies embedded into other arenas. It took me forever to try to find if we even had racial equity policies. And as I began to kind of look, I did find some policies as it related to equity. And I found some things in our policies, but it's hard to find. And sometimes we need to kind of really look at it and revisit this and retool it, because as I looked at it, if somebody was looking at Palm Beach County to find out if we even had a policy on racial equity, they wouldn't be able to find it just from our little areas that's underneath our policies, A, B, C, D. It's not there. You've got to dig deep. And I thank Ms. Rico for helping me to go through it to find all the different pieces. But we need to review that. We need to review it quickly, and we need to rethink it. The Council of Great City Schools, all of the 70 school districts of the big urbans, they are sending their policies to the council, and the council will send us all of the policies from the 76 school districts so that we can compare our policies as to what's happening at the national level. And so we really need to pull it out. I know we need another workshop on it, and I would love to see us have a way when we click in for policies, it should be some kind of way that we can zero in to where the racial equity policies are, or equity policies in general, not for someone to have to hunt and peck to find it. So it's buried. It's really buried. So we need to figure out a way. I talked to Ms. Rico. She said that's something that could be done if we could find a way for the ones that we have now that we can click in as board members, or the community. The community might be clicking in right now to see what are we doing as it relates to the school board on racial equity. And they'll have a hard time finding it. So we need to kind of make sure that's clearer for people to find, but we need to pull it all out and revisit it again.
Mrs. McGuinn?
In terms of this will be the third that we'll vote on workshop. I just want to throw my suggestion in that we make this last one that Mrs. Andrews is discussion of priority and the scheduling, because it can be an umbrella for what we do under everything else.
Okay, so Mrs. Andrews, are you asking for a workshop on, or actually the general counsel or the superintendent brings us back a draft policy on racial equity? I mean, there's a bunch of them already, I guess. So what
I need that workshop because we need to talk about what we're doing. I mean, I want the general counsel to kind of find a way for us to pull all of the things that we have in our policies as it relates to racial equity. But we need to come back and look at what we have. We need to look at what other progressive and exemplary programs that are around the country and in the state of Florida, and begin to look at what we're doing and what we're not doing so we can do better.
Mrs. Rico?
Thank you. I just want to get some clarity around the direction. So we had provided at Mrs. Andrews' request a list with a link in our memo that was sent to you all recently, with all of the policies that related to racial equity, disparity, discrimination. I mean, I just tried to gather as many, and as Mrs. Andrews said, some are in regard to personnel matters, some are the or in regard to business operations. And then we do have the equity policy that you all passed last year. With respect to how to reorganize those to maybe create some kind of a crosswalk, that would be something that as soon as Mr. Harris is back from his leave, I will commit to getting with him and Mrs. Bass to see how those can be better searched. As for the content of those, I believe Mrs. Andrews is asking for a review of those to ensure that they are done well, that there's more or less we could do, there's additional concepts that could be in there, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those are three different things, and I just wanted to get clarity around. I guess the board workshop would be the part where you all would review those policies and see where you wanted to go.
Mrs. Andrews?
Yeah, I know this is going to take some time, but somebody died, which put the whole country on notice that if we don't look at what we do as elected officials, then we are to blame for the next thing that could happen. We hopefully won't have another time where it's something like this because we need to do our work. So yes, it's going to take some time to look at the policy that we have and what other people are doing, progressive things that are across the country. And we need to take the time to get it done. So I don't know if it could be 3 or 4 more things. I'm willing to give my time to make sure that we get it right so that Palm Beach County students and staff and everybody that's a part of us will really take it serious that we have work to do. And it's being done all over the country now. Everybody's taking a look at themselves and stepping up to the plate.
Dr. Robinson?
Thank you. So, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. On the other hand, it's very disturbing to me because people have been dying for centuries. Okay, so I just want to say that this conversation, when this data comes back, this will not be the umbrella workshop. This will be the workshop that talks about disparities and lack of equity when it comes to discipline and policing in the school district. There's a whole nother gigantic umbrella that's called equity that includes work in every department in every school, right? And so that concept, which is why it takes me back to that issue of the budget for the work, because, okay, I'm gonna leave that alone now. But let me just put out there that one of the entities that we should look at, I think, is GARE, the Government Alliance for Racial Equity. They may have some policy review toolkits that will help us, even though they are not limited to just school districts, but there'll be some overlap there. And I would also suggest actually that we start by looking at what policies Guilford County has, since the whatever her title is, the lead partner or whatever her title is for Racial Equity Institute is on the school board there. So I'm going to work under the assumption that she has been working racial equity into the policies of her school district, if she could get the votes, right? So, but yeah, I'm glad to look at this, but I'm glad we woke up. All right, bye.
So, Mrs. Rico, I'm not sure what kind of motion we need here and we've been all over the place, so I'm not sure we're discussing racial equity in the general the police department. I mean, what does the board want in the way of a workshop so the superintendent knows what he needs to bring back to us?
Okay, that's why I divided it out. So if I'm wrong, Mrs. Andrews, let me know. One motion was to have myself, Mrs. Bass, and my team look at how to improve the search for and the location for our current policies that have to do with racial equity, et cetera. Okay, so that would be one, and I've committed to do that, and I don't even need a motion, but unless, okay, so that's one action. And then the other is to bring back a workshop to review the current policies and determine if there are improvements, changes, expansions, modifications to those policies, or perhaps more of a focus, because I think some of the policies combine a lot of a lot of things. And I think that what I'm hearing is you want some very focused policies having to do with racial equity. And so that would be a motion for a workshop. And then I'm not sure what the third thing was, but along the
Okay, so on the first, you're clear on working with Mrs. Bass. You're clear on working with Mrs. Bass. We don't need a motion on that one. So if we need a motion to ask the superintendent to schedule a workshop on racial equity and bring all those policies to that workshop so that we can figure out how we can tie them together or whatever we have to do to make it more clear and easier for everybody in the world to find when they look at the Palm Beach County School Board and District, correct? Okay, so Mrs. Andrews, is that, go ahead, Dr. Robin.
No, let Mrs. Andrews clarify what her request and then come back to me, please.
Go ahead, Mrs. Andrews.
I definitely don't want us to leave the school police information. That's a big piece that we've got to hear from the chief of police, Safe Schools, with this information about what they're doing, how they're doing it, the selection of their officers, the policies that they have. They have a use of force policy and a general order. I've never seen it before. We need to have a presentation as soon as possible about how they do business. That's a biggie too. And that can be brought to the school board meeting ASAP so that we can find out this information as it relates to felony suspensions, expulsions, the number of arrests, teen court, the data on the youth court, all of those pieces. We haven't had a conversation on those things in a long time.
Do you want that? You want all of that in one workshop? Yes?
Yes, yes.
Right. Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. My request is before we start revise, we have a racial equity policy, right? And so, I mean, we would go a long way if we just worked our policy. But before we start, my request is before we start changing policies around, that we outline some kind of collective education around equity and racial equity. Because I'm not really sure, I think all of us have been to Racial Equity Institute at some time in the past, right? You lose that understanding if you don't walk in that world, if you don't have those conversations, if you don't question yourself on a regular basis. As a collective, we have not questioned ourselves with regards to equity with any kind of regularity at all. So before we start tweaking policies, which is, I think we need to end up there, I would ask that we have some kind of maybe series of maybe several modules on how we get educated on and look at and discuss equity, right? Because otherwise it's just a word.
All right, so let me make a suggestion. We bring all this stuff to a workshop because we're all over the place here, and it's very important stuff, but it's like all over the place. So we need to bring it all to a workshop, get all those questions answered, have the superintendent staff bring us all the information, including school police, our current policies, so we can take a look at everything at once, and then we can go from there. We can decide at that workshop what we want to do with respect to all of this stuff. But I think we need to start with a workshop before we start with any policy revisions or anything else. So Mrs. Andrews, are you comfortable with just that kind of a workshop? You're shaking your head yes.
Yes.
So that's Mrs. Andrews' motion. We have a second. Mr. Shaw. Mr. Shaw.
Yeah, just one thing. When we do that workshop, this issue is important enough that I would hope that the day we do that we don't do anything else that day, that we focus on this item so that we have a chance to really have the discussions and look at the seriousness of this issue and not get distracted with other kinds of things.
Agreed. It's an important issue. We all have, we all have input, and we don't want to schedule a 1 hour workshop when it's actually something that's going to take 3 hours. So, so let's vote on the motion. Was there a second? I believe Mr. Shaw, I called on you. Were you seconding the motion? Yes. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. So, Mr. Superintendent, if you could get that workshop scheduled for us, and then make sure it's not on a day when we have a day like today where we have workshop, long meetings, board discussion items. Maybe if we need a special meeting for something like simple, we do it after.
So as I've processed everything, I would propose to the board that we do a year's long worth of workshops. This isn't like a one-shot deal. I think we had to schedule a regular cadence of workshops just dedicated to these things. So I would argue we need to start somewhere. So I would propose we start with at least answering the questions as submitted, and then let the team, because we also have this really stressful tension of time to open schools. So now I need to go sit with the team and figure out what we can do now, and then look at the calendar about adding more meetings in between all of the other workshops we've already put on the books to get you guys up to speed on everything else, which will also probably take a lot of conversation considering all the health stuff associated with COVID. So if the board is, so the motion is carried, but just process with me, if we could start to answer the questions that Ms. Andrews asked and use that sort of as the catalyst, and then offline we start working, maybe we create the project plan so we can get clarity on what's to be brought back, and then we can create that timeline. You know, we need to have a discussion between now and the vote of the new job descriptions. So maybe we bring back some proposals now that we have a rough understanding of how much money we're saving. Maybe we go look and say, well, maybe we can find 500,000 to $1 million. I mean, I don't know, to start building the team that can make this their sole focus. And maybe we bring some of those, even though we're not in the business, even though right now we're in this sort of moment of reducing, but with this first phase and what Mike has told us, I'm sure we can scrape up some dollars to then propose some other job descriptions to be all talked about at the same time. So there's a lot in my head just trying to figure out the cadence, because the problem I'm having, if we do too much at one time, then it kind of gets lost. So I think we have to kind of parcel it out and just commit to this being a regular workshop over the duration of time, because things will be changing. I mean, stuff will just be happening. I hope I'm explaining myself right. I just don't see how we cram it all in till a meeting the third week of July when our focus is going to be on a million other things. That's kind of what I'm saying. I hope I'm not being crazy with my thoughts.
Mrs. Andrews, then Dr. Robinson.
Yes, I would like, and I hear you, Dr. Fanoa, and I do agree with that, but I would like to have some kind of a chart or format or to show what we're planning on doing, and we can check off what we're doing. The things that we know we need to be doing, the staff, just like you said, there's so many pieces of this puzzle. So we can check off where we are. We can make a list of all the things that we need to be doing. It may take a year, but see that format so that we don't lose focus of the things that we still have left on the burner to take care of.
Shaking his head, Dr. Robinson.
Yes, so what I think I heard was that we're looking to schedule some workshop time at least once a month that will be centered on equity, and that there'll be subtopics over time for each one of those meetings, and that maybe the first one is the data that Mrs. Andrews requested, but I'm going to vigorously suggest that the next ones are about educating us so that we can see equity and lack thereof, because it's in our face and we don't see it at times. Thank you.
So with that being said, I think I have some direction, but I will request, so for Dr. Robinson, next time we have a one-on-one, let's start outlining it. And then you can be a thought partner with the team. I'd even probably argue at some point, maybe I find another project management team to help us really spell this out, similar to what we're doing with the Return to School Task Force. So just let me get with the team. Now, I think we've talked about enough for us to we know what the big picture is, but I just wanted to say to the board, I don't want us to be a shot in the arm. I think we need to spread this out so we can get deep. I think Dr. Robinson makes a great point around the education piece. So let me just circle back with everybody. We're committed, we're gonna do it. Let's just say that, and we'll figure out the details along the way.
All right, Mrs. Andrews, does that take care of your board discussion item for tonight? Your microphone, Mrs. Andrews.
The last one was about the proclamation that Erica read today, that I read last week, and thank you, Dr. Robinson, for asking for that to be put into the record. As I sit as your representative on the Council of Great City Schools, the 76 large school districts every Friday, many of them have done their own resolution as it related to George Floyd, a proclamation. And so, you know, I love what Michael Casterly did, and we're kind of using that. But just like Dr. Robinson said, we can expand out on all of this, what this has meant to us and where we're going with it in a different kind of proclamation, if you would like to do that, or you could remain with what we have. But I think it would be nice for us to expand it.
Any other discussion on that? Dr. Robinson?
So I might be wrong, but I'm gonna just tell you because I'm in my feelings a bit. So I don't know how we expand it. Okay, so this moment in time, like the whole world knows the name of Mr. George Floyd. Much of the world knows a few of the other names. But if we start naming names, we can't possibly name them all. It's impossible. And I don't want to disrespect by not acknowledging what happened to them. Anybody who has been, whether it's been unarmed, killed by the police, whether it's been the lynchings, as I'm gonna encourage you to look at this book called Without Sanctuary. But I just don't want to start listing for fear of disrespecting those who we don't list, whether we didn't know or the list got too long or whatever, right? And so that's my thought. Like I said, maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I feel about it at the moment. So.
All right, Dr. Robinson, you want to go with the last board discussion under PD3?
Yeah, thank you. So I was looking for her name and I can't find her name. You may have received this email too, but I don't know. So maybe a week or two ago, I got an email from a teacher, a first-year teacher who just finished her first year with us, who is a graduate of University of Florida, who said that some of her students asked, why don't we have a class on race and racism? And she attached the syllabus from a course that she took at University of Florida. And so you'll see that attached to the agenda item. And I have to say, glancing at it, it looks like it was good. I was actually surprised about University of Florida in terms of their history of addressing race. I just had to throw that in. But anyway, so I was pleasantly surprised. And so when I spoke to Mr. Knowles, who, by the way, you know, the African American Summer Institute is next week. When I spoke to him, he told me he already had started drafting such a course. I asked that he make sure that the course is at least as good as this one. I think that knowing his skill set, he could do much better. But I brought this forward to the board to ask that we direct staff to go forward with developing this course for high school students and bring it back to us for approval so it can be sent to the state.
So that's a motion being made by Mrs. Rico. Is that something that we can vote on tonight, or is that something we have to put on the agenda for next week? I know there's some distinction about what we can do at a board.
Right. So I think the motion would be to bring it back next week for action. That would be tonight's motion, to put this on an agenda for next week. To on.
Okay, so
Okay, you want to explain that to me then? Why is this one to be put on next week and the other ones weren't?
They are all future. Every single one of these was going to you were asking for workshops.
Okay.
Okay, so none of the merits of anything has been voted on. Everything was going to workshop.
Okay.
If you're really not supposed to take action in a workshop or on board items, there's no process for that. But if you recall, my guidance to the board was that you all have limited actions to vote on bringing things to an agenda so that you can take action, so that they just don't float in the air. So this is something that you're not asking for a workshop, you're actually asking for action. So that's my suggestion. I do think we need to codify all that in policy, but it's just a way to get you all to be able to move things forward without sort of being vague.
Okay, so before you get on that boat to leave town, Mrs. Rico, you get us that policy, please. Mrs. Andrews, are you seconding that motion by Mrs.?
Yes.
Okay, under discussion, Ms. Brill.
So if I understood Dr. Robinson correctly, Mr. Knowles is already working on that course. So rather than bring back the request that he work on it, shouldn't we have him put the course on the agenda and then approve that it be sent to the state?
Dr. Fenoy?
I'm not really sure what the procedure is. I sort of have to defer that to the team, but yeah, I don't know what the procedure. I'm open.
And so basically, what Ms. Brill is asking for is for you to add a course to a high school curriculum, and we bring that back next week, or this course that he's already developed.
No, I'm sorry. Can I follow up?
Yes, certainly. Go ahead.
Okay. No, what I was asking, I thought that we weren't adding, I agree with adding it to high school, but that's another story. I thought what we were asking for was for him to develop a course to be sent to the Department of Education for their approval to be added. So since he's already working on that course and we're all in agreement that that's a good idea, why don't we just have whatever the syllabus is or whatever brought back to us so that we can approve sending it to the state instead of a two-step approval, right?
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So I read Dr. Robinson's discussion on it. It did say develop new high school course on race and racism. It did say adopt it. So yeah, if we can do next week's agenda.
There are other board members that need to speak before I respond.
I see two hands, I think. Mrs. Whitfield and Mrs. McQuinn.
Thank you. So I actually talked to Mr. Oswald about this the other day, and we kind of had a discussion about two thoughts about courses. One thing that has kind of come up in the past when we've talked to Brother Muhammad was about, the participation in the classes, that we have said that one of the reasons that we couldn't have these classes in our schools consistently across the board was that people wouldn't take them. And so I was thinking that one of the things that could be helpful in this situation now would be that we committed to having the classes, even if they were poorly attended, to make sure that they were there, and then encourage people because of their existence. Like we could commit to say, okay, even if only 5 kids are in that class, we're going to make sure that it's provided on every campus at every high school level, so that we can start building up a following for those classes rather than waiting for 20 kids to all be inspired to take a class so that we can provide it. And then the other thought that Mr. Oswald had, which I think was better than mine, was to provide the racial equity training at all of our high schools, and that we would need some funding for that. So I think that, again, this is another opportunity in this time to reach out to our partners to actually provide the opportunity for that to happen for all of our high school students so that they can take that class. And so just wanted to put that out there as potential options.
Mrs. McQuinn, then Dr. Robinson.
I'm in total agreement about a course, but I just don't know. I haven't had time to look at the syllabus thoroughly, and frankly, I would rely on Dr. Robinson because she's made herself an expert in this kind of research. So I want us to have a course. I would just like some guidance in, is that the course? So that's all I'm asking, is that we not limit ourselves right now to a particular course. She may find, or anybody may find something else out there that would be better. That's all.
Dr. Robinson.
Thank you. So I used the University of Florida syllabus by way of example. I think that the students are demanding. I think I might have actually sent you guys a copy of a news article, but the students are demanding this now, right? Because they're kind of going, okay, wait, what's going on? What I understood to be true appears to not be true, and they're trying to settle it. So we need to help them and prepare the next generation and the next generation of law enforcement officers and so forth. So, and the other point is, I don't know if Mr. Knowles' course is fully developed and ready to be put on the agenda for a meeting next week or anytime, but it might be. I just can't say that with certainty. The other thing is that it should be an honors course, or at least be, I can't think of the term where you could be in a class, and if you do the extra work, you get honors credit, but you can be enrolled as a regular student. And I don't want to put, I want to agree with Mrs. Whitfield, 100%, right? Because I would like to wave this magic wand and say every student takes this course, right? I also understand the political realities, and so, but we can do things, for example, that like Palm Beach Lakes did, where every freshman takes African American history. And then the second year, he changed it to African American history and Caribbean studies, right? And so the students, by and large, are studying their own history. And he has attributed that to some of the increase in performance at the school, right? So I think we could leave that to principals to say, on this campus, I need you to make sure that you understand these things. But right now, I'm just asking that we develop the course, and that we also, really need to audit, as part of the equity work, we need to audit our course selection sheets, because by and large, the reason students don't sign up for, well, the students that I've talked to, is because it wasn't on the course selection sheet. They did not know it was an option. And in this case, I'm talking about African American history, or the great kings and queens of Africa, or hip hop as literature. They didn't know that those things were available because it wasn't on the course selection sheet. So we really need to audit those to see if the diversity of our courses, to represent the diversity of our students, are on those course selection sheets. But in the meantime, I just want this board to agree that for Mr. Knowles to finish completing the course. If it's not completed, bring it to us so we can approve it. They can get the course code or whatever they need to get from DOE, so it can in fact be on the next printed course selection sheet for every high school. Thanks.
So, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind me responding to that. So I agree with that. So tomorrow morning, the deputy superintendent and I have a conversation. We have a one-on-one. So give us some time to start talking about this. Then we will start bringing some information, and then we'll kind of create a strategy of the people we need to get involved. And then we'll start working with the board one-on-one before another meeting about our updates. And just let Mr. Oswald and I start figuring out the structure to move forward. Because if Mr. Knowles has it done, then when I bring it back to the board, I actually agree with whoever said it. Let's just have it all done. So that way let's just have it all done. So let me say publicly that I'm committed to doing this. Mr. Oswald and I'll start working on it tomorrow.
All right, good. So we don't need a motion that the superintendent's agreed to bring us what we would like to see on that. Is there any further discussion? We need a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mrs. Whitfield, seconded by everybody else. All in favor?
You guys look too happy to adjourn.
Okay, thank you all. The meeting is.
All right, talk to you later.